Good evening, all. I'm Vivienne Benesch, producing artistic director, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the third episode of our PlayMakers Keeping You Company series, Think Like an Actor, with the one and only Ray Dooley. After over 30 years and more than 100 productions as one of the great luminaries on stage at PlayMakers, in the classroom at UNC, and throughout the Greater Triangle community, he is now, unsurprisingly, a star on our virtual platforms. It will come as no surprise to you that the first episodes of Think Like an Actor were such a success that Ray has decided to keep it going as a multi-episode series. I believe a number of you may be returning for the third time tonight. But if you missed the first two episodes, exploring Hamlet's to be or not to be, and the Get Thee to a Nunnery scene, you can view them anytime on our YouTube channel. We place the link in the chat box, or you can always go to our website and find it there. Tonight, Ray will pick up where he left off at the end of Act 3, Scene 1, and then lead us through Hamlet's directions to the players. Using this very meta speech, Ray will help us understand all the questions to ask, clues to look for, as an actor prepares to tread the boards in Shakespeare's most famous play. Maybe he will even give us a little insight into whether or not these were Shakespeare's own lessons to the actors of his day. If you'd like to follow along, the text will appear in your chat box. And speaking of the chat box, while you won't be able to speak directly to me or to Ray while he's talking, I encourage you to find the chat button at the bottom of your screen and write in any questions you might have. You can do this at any point during the class. It won't interrupt. And I will use some of those questions to facilitate a short Q&A when Ray is done. So without further ado, it is my great privilege to pass this off to a man who does indeed speak the speech trippingly and brilliantly on the tongue, Ray Dooley.
Hello, thank you.
Oh, hi, Ray.
Hi, thank you so much.
Of course, it's always my pleasure, and I will sign off quickly because we never have enough time. So have a wonderful class.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome,
I'll
everybody.
be back.
All right. Thanks for being here again. It's my pleasure. I want to begin, in case there are people who haven't been with us before, with some acknowledgments that the ideas that I'm working with are coming from a couple of sources. The first is a book by Bernard Grabanier called The Heart of Hamlet. It's out of print now, but it's an outstanding account of the play that Shakespeare wrote, as the subtitle is. And for scholarly help, Professor Harold Jenkins' Arden edition of the play, the second edition of the Arden series of Hamlet. I believe there's been 3 now, but the second edition is really special. And for acting, Declan Donnellan's book, The Actor and the Target, as you can see. That is the vocabulary that I now use when I teach acting. It's a terrific book, not only for actors, but anyone who's interested in acting. Okay, let us pick up where we left off. It was Act 3, Scene 1. Hamlet and Ophelia had their meeting. And in that meeting, a couple of points to bring forward. First, we realized that right after Ophelia says, my lord, you gave me remembrances that I have longed to re-deliver. I pray you now receive them. Hamlet says no. She says, my lord, you know right well you did. And with them words of such sweet breath composed has made the things more rich, their perfume lost. Take these again, for to the noble mind, rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind. There, my lord. And she puts them down and probably starts to walk away. Hamlet has a choice to make here. He can let her go. That'll be the end of it. Or he can keep it going and press the point. So this, as it turns out, is the place where Hamlet's text goes from the iambic pentameter verse to prose. Now, if you're thinking like an actor, and you see this in your text, you say to yourself, okay, something's going on here, something. There are all these rules, you know, of thumb that you hear, oh, well, his mind is going this way, or whatever. What matters is that the actor can make sense of it to himself. And it always seemed to me at this point that Hamlet's weighing in his mind whether he should pursue this. He has, as we know, all the pressure of not being able to perform the ghost's command to take revenge on his uncle. He has this, as we learn in this scene coming up, we won't go through it again, but we learn that he feels the world has been poisoned by the sexual behavior of his mother with his uncle. And that for him, women, oh, most pernicious woman, he says earlier on, frailty, thy name is woman. And he's having that working in him as well. So there goes Ophelia. She's walking away. She's ignored his advances for like at least 2 weeks, but probably longer. And now here she is. So it's that moment, maybe you or someone you know has had that moment where you know maybe you shouldn't say something, but the adrenaline starts to run and you just start in. And that's where we start. Are you honest, my lord? Are you fair? What means your lordship? That if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty. And back and forth they go. And it's all in prose. And Hamlet finally tells her to get to a nunnery. And by that literally means go, do not breed more people into this corrupt world. Go to a nunnery where you can be protected from this world and live out your life in isolation and in chaste isolation. And his last line, let's see, which one is that? Oh yes, I have heard of your paintings too well enough. God has given you one face and you make yourselves another. You jig, you amble, and you lisp. You nickname God's creatures and make your wantonness, your ignorance, go to, I'll no more on. It hath made me mad. I say, we will have no more marriages. Those that are married already, all but one, shall live. The rest shall keep as they are. To a nunnery, go. And he exits. Of course, he's talking about Claudius. The rest shall keep as they are. No one will marry in this new world that he conceives of. So now, here's Ophelia. Let's stop for a moment and look at Ophelia's speech here. A wonderful, wonderful piece. She's left alone on stage. Her father and the king are behind the curtain over there somewhere. Hamlet has just behaved, in her mind, like a crazy man. And so what we learned from To Be or Not to Be, you'll remember back to our first time together, when the actor is alone on stage, point of view for an actor is all text seeks to change perspective. Are there exceptions to this? No. This is right out of Declan Donnellan's book, The Actor and the Target. So if that's the case, and we could think of it like if there are 90 degrees in the triangle and you know 2 of the other angles, you can solve for the third angle. So to here, what happens if we apply this tenet, this axiom to what Ophelia is doing? Oftentimes at this moment, the actress playing Ophelia will have an emotional breakdown of some sort and play looks like about 15 lines of emotional breakdown. That doesn't quite do it because she has lines to speak. Now let's see what those lines are. Who does she speak to? The audience is there. So she's going to play her action, which is to say she's going to try to change the perspective of the audience. Audience, did you see what I see? She says, oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. Right? Did you all see that? The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. The expectancy and rose of the fair state, the observed of all observers, the glass of fashion and the mould of form. Quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched, that sucked the honey of his music vows, now see that sovereign reason, that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh, that unmatched form and fashion of blown youth blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me to have seen what I have seen, see what I see. Let's unpack that just a little, because there's some wonderful, interesting things in that. Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. You saw that, folks, right? You see what I see? His mind has gone. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars. So this is the description of the ideal prince. And we get this in Machiavelli. It's a common theme in literature of this time. But what if you're playing Hamlet, you're listening to this? And you think, Ophelia is describing me as the courtier, soldier, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. Interestingly, she inverts it's the courtier's eye, soldier's tongue, the scholar's sword? No, it should be the other way around. She inverts it, which, what do we make of that? We don't know, but the actress playing Ophelia will do that. The same thing, of course, happens in Midsummer Night's Dream with Bottom. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, etc. When he wakes up from his dream. That's based on the Gospel according to Matthew, I think it is. Anyway, the courtier's eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state. The expectancy. They expected him to be elected king, or he's next in line, which is interesting for the actor playing Hamlet to hear, because he, later on in Act 5, Scene 2, with Horatio, says of Claudius, he popped in between the election and my hopes. This is an elected kingship. And the rose of the fair state, the rose we hear in Richard II, plucked down Richard that lovely rose and planted that thorn, that canker, Bolingbroke. This idea of the rose being the prime flower. And in the great chain of being, which was part of the cosmology of the Elizabethans, each genus, animals, the lion was king of the animals, the rose was the first in line of the flowers. So she's calling him the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion, not only the fashionable one, but the very mirror by which everyone judged themselves. And a little bit earlier in Henry IV, Part 2, Lady Percy talks about her deceased husband, Hotspur. He was the glass in which everybody fashioned themselves. So it's the same idea. So much of Shakespeare is like a hyperlinked text that goes back and forth among the plays. And you can, if you're wondering what a meaning is in one play, you go back and see how the meanings were in other plays. It's almost a direct correspondence between Henry IV and Hamlet here. And the mold of form, the very mold of form, the thing that everything else was made out of. So all of this, she goes on. And if you're playing Hamlet, you understand that that Hamlet is not some wan, retiring, overly intellectual figure. That he is, in fact, the prince that everyone looked up to. He's the best courtier, the best soldier, the best scholar. He had all of those attributes. And so if you're playing Hamlet, you must load that in and understand. And when Claudius is plotting with Laertes in Act 4, he says, no, I can't kill him because the people love him too much. Something else to pack into your head if you're playing Hamlet. So this is a charismatic guy who everybody admires. Quite down. And then she says, folks, here am I. I was the recipient of his vows. And now I see the noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. That the reason which should be governing the rest of him is like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. Ophelia here is speaking in verse, and we think of verse as a kind of compressed truth. And oftentimes, in order to paraphrase, you have to use a whole lot more words than Shakespeare uses. sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh, that unmatched form and feature of blown youth. And by blown youth there, she means like our expression full blown, that this is youth in full blown flower that has been blasted like a flower is blasted. Only in this case, blasted with ecstasy. And in Shakespeare, the word ecstasy means madness. And we'll see that in the scene with Gertrude a little later. Ecstasy, lay not that flattering unction to your soul that not your trespass, but my madness speaks, he says to her. So Ophelia thinks he's mad from everything that's happened. And she turns to, oh, woe is me, to have seen what I have seen, see what I see. So not only have I been a witness to it, but I'm in the middle of this. And the action for the actress playing Ophelia is, does anybody have an answer for me? And right at that moment, when she is reaching out with this help, anybody out there help me? Claudius bursts forth, love, his affections do not that way tend, nor what he spake, though it lacked form a little, was not like madness. Claudius, a little savvier perhaps than Ophelia, politician, experienced. He says, no, it wasn't love and it wasn't madness. And so if you're playing Hamlet, you also see what Claudius says here. And an interesting tool for an actor to use is you want to be sure that you are not making your colleagues' lines impossible to say. So if one were to play the nunnery scene with Ophelia in such a way that was truly over the top and, well, mad, makes Claudius's line here very difficult to say. And so in that nunnery scene, as we have seen, Hamlet is making a whole lot of sense within the worldview that he now lives in based on everything that has happened. And Claudius picks up on this. He says, no, not love, not madness. He goes on. He says, there's something in his soul o'er which his melancholy sits on brood. So he's actually using the idea of a hen sitting on an egg. There's something in his soul o'er which his melancholy sits on brood. And I do doubt the hatch and disclose will be some danger. And again, in our hyperlinked world, we remember back to Julius Caesar and my dear friend and colleague, Geoffrey Cornell, brilliant as Brutus, where he talks about, 'tis the bright day that brings forth the adder. And that Caesar is like a serpent in the shell, once hatched, is dangerous, then kill him in the shell. So again, we see that Shakespeare using similar imagery of this thing growing inside of Hamlet in Claudius's view. And when that thing hatches, look out. So at this point, Claudius says, okay, I've got a plan. We're going to send him to England. Polonius says, yeah, okay, maybe, but I still think it was love. And then we have the final line of this scene where then they plot the thing where Polonius is going to listen when Gertrude talks to Hamlet. And anyway, Claudius says, let it be so, madness in great ones must not unwatched go. And if you're taking 2 intermissions, this is where your first intermission probably is. Interesting, he says that word unwatched. We talked a little bit last time about the difference between the folio version, which is the book, the big hardbound book that was published in 1623 of all Shakespeare's plays, and the second quarto, which is, we can think of it like a paperback that was put out some years earlier, much earlier, Hamlet being right around 1600. So somewhere out in there. And in one of them, the word is, Claudius says, must not unwatched go. In the other, he says, must not unmatched go. So if you are playing Claudius, you have the choice of saying unwatched or unmatched. One is a little bit more active, isn't it? Must not unmatched go. I must match him. So what this means, if you're thinking like an actor, normally what happens is you get a freshly typed text with no notes or anything. Then you go and you take your text, your ardent text, and you look at each of your lines for the differences between, if it's Hamlet, it's going to be between the folio and the second quarto. And what are the different readings in there? And which one makes the most sense to you? And you can then go back if the one that your director and dramaturg may have picked, it's not the one that makes the most sense to you. You're feeling like you want to be a more active Claudius. You say, hey, you've got unmatched here, but in the folio, you've got unwatched here. In the folio, it's unmatched. Would you mind if I substituted that? That makes more sense to me. I can work with that. And 9 times out of 10, there's a sure, whatever. And the actor then has a firmer step for that Claudius to go on. Okay, end of that scene. Now in Shakespeare's day, they go off and in comes Hamlet, right? Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently. For in the very torrent, tempest, and as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance, which will give it smoothness. Oh, it offends me to the soul to see a periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ear of the groundlings, who for the most part are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. But have such a fellow whipped for o'erdoing termagant. It out Herod's Herod. Pray you, avoid it. Okay, that's the first part. What's going on? All right, so what we know is the day before, the players arrived, and Hamlet, who has already asked Rosencrantz and Guildenstern about how the state of the theater is in town. And they talk about the young boys companies that have taken over and become all the rage. And so the players have to tour because the young boys companies have taken the town by storm. Now we think about this. So is this Wittenberg in whatever medieval time it is, or as Viv hinted at in her introduction, or is this in fact London of the beginning of the 17th century? And if you are playing Hamlet, as we'll see with more of what is about to come up, you have to use a good Shakespearean word, compass the reality of the narrative of Hamlet. But now we have added into it some references to what appear to be going on in London in the time that Hamlet is being played. So we'll take a look at that. A famous one of this, which may or may not be true, is when Juliet says, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." Well, one of the Globe, they were the Lord Chamberlain's men, I guess, at Romeo and Juliet time, at the Globe. And down the road was the Rose Theater. And so one hears, maybe apocryphal, but the Rose was built on lower ground and had a particular odor about it that when you would go to the play there, it kind of smelled bad, like a swamp. And so the Juliet's line, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet," may or may not have been a little gentle dig at the opposing team. Anyway, speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you. As I pronounced it to you, what speech? At the end of 2-2, Hamlet says, "Can you play the murder of Gonzago?" And the older player, the first player, says, "Aye, my lord." Says, "We'll have it tomorrow night." You could, for a need, put in, a speech of some dozen or 16 lines that I would set down and insert in it, could you not? And the player says, aye, my lord. He says, good. So this is, Hamlet has written a dozen or 16 lines, which we will hear in the play within a play a little later in Act 3. Now, some productions, particularly if we're coming back from intermission, they have the player going, hands black, thoughts apt, further fit and time, and Hamlet goes, no, speak the speech I pray. So actually Hamlet running a rehearsal. Okay, maybe. What we lose here, I think, is this idea. Remember, we've been in prose, and we're back here in prose again, we note. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounce it to you. Where prose has rhythm, but no meter. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. Bang, 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 bang. And it is what it says, trippingly on the tongue. So if we don't take the intermission there, Hamlet, remember, has just said, to a nunnery go, and he's played a very hot, cogent, but hot scene with Ophelia. By hot, I mean energetic. The mental energy has been going a mile a minute. So you're playing Hamlet. You finish the scene, to a nunnery go. You run off stage. You think, thank God, Claudius and Polonius and Ophelia are going to carry the play for the next 7 minutes. Great, I got a break. You take your thing, you take your drink, you get ready, and you're right back on. Now, some critics have noted that, of course, this must be the evening because it's dark when the play goes, because Claudius famously, like, give me some light, away, because it's dark there. So we assume it's in the evening. We assume the scene with Ophelia takes place in the afternoon, perhaps. In Shakespeare, when you're playing Shakespeare, there can be literally two time signatures. One is if you stop and think and you go, okay, well, this must be evening and this is earlier, so it's a couple of hours later. But when you're playing it, it doesn't feel that way. And when you're watching it, it doesn't feel that way. And this is true not only of Hamlet, of many, many of Shakespeare's plays. If you are watching this play, the idea that this may be 4 hours later, it doesn't feel that way. And if you're playing Hamlet, it doesn't feel that way. The adrenaline is running from the scene with Ophelia. And as far as Shakespeare is concerned, the adrenaline is still running. Now, remember, we thought maybe I shouldn't have got into that little back and forth with Ophelia because I let out some of what I am feeling about the world and my mother and women. And I just couldn't stop myself because the adrenaline was running. And maybe all of us had that feeling. Yeah, shouldn't have said that. And he's still running high on adrenaline. So you come back on stage and you're given quite a bit of text. That was just the first part that we just heard. So he is talking about the speech that he has just maybe read as I pronounced it to you. So he read the speech to the player. He gave it to him to learn. And now he's saying, so the player is a professional. He's good. And Hamlet, all of a sudden, we learn from Hamlet that he is something of an expert in the theater, about acting. Okay, if you're playing Hamlet, then you have to build back into your understanding of the character. And it's not only here, but he asks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern about the players. When the player comes in, he says to the player, he says, I heard they speak me a speech once, but it was never acted. Or if it was, not above once. For the play, I remember pleased not the million. 'Twas caviar to the general, but it was as I received it, and others whose opinion in such matters cried in the top of mine, an excellent play. So Hamlet has a history of theater going. Okay, so Wittenberg, university town. So as you're thinking about Hamlet's life in Wittenberg, or maybe here at the court, traveling players, maybe. But we mentioned Julia, who says the orchard wall is high and hard to climb. How does she know? Has she tried to climb it? Maybe so. These little character hints. So here's Hamlet, who has apparently spent some time in the theater with learned friends, and they've discussed it. They've discussed what makes good theater, but why does Hamlet go on for like a full page of text and run on with this? Another adage that we use as actors is words are a response to a need. If you've got this much text, the need to keep speaking must be enormous. That's your job as an actor. If you're thinking like an actor, you think, okay, all this text, so what's the need? Well, first of all, I want the thing to be done well so that Claudius is trapped by it. And we can get a long way with that, right? Saying to the actor, no, you've got to do this right, because if you don't do it right, the damn thing isn't going to work, right? So that's good motivation. And we get a long way with that. But also, there's this adrenaline thing going on. And, you know, there's those times maybe where you've had a close call, or you've come through something that almost like he's in shock, you know? That might be a way to think about it. He's almost like he's in shock. And all of this adrenaline-driven ideas come pouring out of him in these big prose chunks, because the adrenaline is still running and ideas are cascading in from left, right, and center. And he's also maybe trying to run away from the scene that he just played with Ophelia, where he in fact talked about what he really felt about the world and women. And some of this then becomes a visceral driver that is coming out on language. He could have gone and run 5 miles, maybe if it was a modern play, or gone to the gym and done some heavy lifting. But no, it's all coming out on language in this play. Not all of it. There's a great sword fight later on, but we'll talk about that another time. Here he comes. Speak the speech, that speech that I wrote. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Had as lief is Shakespearean for I would have just as well had it gone that way. Had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Then, nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus. And when you're teaching acting, you teach young actors who mean well and think it will mean more if they wave their arms about. You say, no, if you're waving your arms about, we're watching your arms and we're not listening to your text. So one of the things young actors working on an empty stage with text-heavy plays have to learn is you are efficient with your body. And when you make a gesture or you make a movement on the stage, you do it for a purpose. Otherwise, you stand still. And do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently. Maybe if you do, Claudius will hear what I've written. For in the very torrent, tempest, and as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you've seen actors get like this, the whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire, you must learn, and beget, and procreate in artistic terms, a temperance which may give it smoothness. It has to be human. It has to be shaped, artistically shaped. It's a very interesting thing that Hamlet has just come from a scene where he did not acquire a temperance that gave it smoothness. He let himself go. Claudius saw through it, but he let himself go in that scene. And it may be in this scene, and we'll see a little bit later with Horatio especially, that he wishes for something that he himself does not have. So we'll go on. It offends me to the soul to hear a robustius petted with pated tear a passion to tatters to very rags. And then to split the ear of the groundlings in Shakespeare's theater, the people who paid a penny and were around the stage, and maybe you're not so educated, and you wonder that the original Hamlet turned to them and say, split the ear of the ground, who for the most part are capable of inexplicable dumb shows and incapable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. And did those people then go, ah, the heck with you? Very interesting question. I would have such a fellow whipped for doing termagant. So termagant is a big loud creature. Some critics think it was a character in the medieval mystery plays, which came in the century before Shakespeare, or centuries before. And then similarly, it out-Herods Herod. And in these mystery plays, of course, they're retelling the Bible story, and Herod is a famous tyrant who screams and yells in those particular plays that we still have copies of, the Wakefield mystery plays and others. So this torrent is coming at the actor, and he's maybe like there, and a couple of, depends on your K, if you have a few more, if you have actors to play the other actors in the company, you know, the actor's looking like, what's up with Hamlet? What's going on with him? And, you know, and he says, Hamlet says, pray you avoid it. And the player says, I warrant your honor. Like, yeah, okay, we got it. But then Hamlet continues, be not too tame, neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so o'erdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature. There's our mirror again, remember? The glass of fashion. To hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Now, this overdone, or come untimely off, though it make the unskillful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of the which one must in your allowance o'erweigh a whole theatre of others. Oh, there have been players that I have heard play and heard others praise, and that highly, not to say profanely, who, having neither the accent of Christian nor the gait of Christian, pagan, nor man, so strutted and bellowed that I thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and made them not well. They imitated humanity so abominably. At that point, the player has been listening to all this, and it comes as a torrent, tempest, nay, as we may say, as a whirlwind. And the player says, I hope we have reformed that indifferently with us. And Hamlet says, oh, reform it altogether. And let not those that play your clowns speak, and let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them. For there be of them who will laugh themselves, is set on some barren quantity of spectators to laugh as well, though in the meantime some necessary question of the play is to be considered. That's villainous and shows a most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Pray you avoid it. Go, make you ready. So all of this goes through. We'll look at just a little bit here in the second section. Suit the word to the modesty of nature. So again, part of this is suit the word to the action. Play my play right so that I will catch Claudius. But also, apparently, Hamlet and his friends at university, perhaps, have discussed the finer points of acting. Or so, if you're thinking like an actor, you must incorporate into your idea of what Hamlet is, even though you're jumping centuries, perhaps. Is this Shakespeare trying to teach actors how best to act his plays? it's pretty good advice. If you follow this advice, you will be an effective actor. Suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, back in with the Greeks maybe, and now, was and is to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature, to see reflected on the stage what is happening in the world. What is the human condition, as we like to say. To hold, as it were, the mirror up to nature. Show virtue, her feature, those things that are virtuous, show them. Scorn, her own image, those things that are to be scorned, to show them as well, because we show, as actors, we show, I remember Mark Wing Davey directing King Lear, saying that it's an evil world that we're about to enter and we're going to show it. And we did, those of you who saw our production of King Lear, 2003. We scorn her own image and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Not to get too far into the weeds, but here's one of those. Is it age and body of the time, or age and body of the time, his form and pressure? If you're playing Hamlet, you have to make a decision if you're thinking like an actor. It seems to me, if you're showing the age, everything around us, and body of the time, the way that age is embodied in the actor's body, his form and pressure. That may be his, may refer to the actor, and the idea behind form and pressure is like wax, and the pressure leaves an imprint. This is Viola. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to leave their forms? How easy is it for a good-looking guy who doesn't mean a girl well to leave his pressure in a woman's waxen heart? The same idea. And of course, they had sealing wax, so this is not an unusual thing for them. So, suit the action to the word to the action, with this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. Must be, and then lines that sometimes are cut. Oh, here's the adrenaline continuing to run. It offends me to the soul. There are players that I have seen play and heard others praise, and that highly, not to speak it profanely. Profanely comes because they were not made by God, as we'll learn, who, having neither the accent of Christian, which is to say, sounding like a civilized person, or the gait, meaning that they couldn't walk across the stage like a normal person, the gait of Christian, pagan, nor man, didn't even look human, had so strutted and bellowed that I thought some of nature's journeymen, not nature herself, but like people who were learning for nature, like in work nature shop, we got to make some men here. That one wasn't so good. I guess we'll make him an actor. Yeah, right, bad actor. Get him out there, And they strutted and bellowed that they imitated humanity so abominably. Then just very quickly, we'll end with this. And the player says, I hope we've reformed it indifferently with us. And Hamlet says, reform it altogether. He's still, the adrenaline is pumping. And let those plays that play your clown speak no more than is set down for them. Now, there's a story, again, whether this is true or not. Will Kemp was one of the Shakespeare's original partners in the Globe Theatre. It was a joint stock company where they each put in money and had stock in it. And Kemp was the clown of the company. And there's some thinking that there might have been some ill blood between Shakespeare, the playwright, and Kemp, the clown, who maybe when some important part of the play was to be considered, started laughing or got the audience, the groundlings, maybe to start laughing with him, and Shakespeare's maybe lost a point of his play. Kemp left the company, and I believe Shakespeare bought out Kemp's share, which is interesting. And then Kemp danced, I believe it was, for 5 days or 9 days. He put on like a publicity stunt and danced to a nearby city. Norwich? No, whatever. And Robert Armin joined the company. And we can see this in Shakespeare's plays because suddenly the clowns are much sweeter and they sing. We think of Feste as opposed to Touchstone. Feste, those clowns who are the fool in King Lear sings. So we can see in Shakespeare's company that, and some barren spectators to laugh to, though in the meantime, some necessary question of the play to be considered. That's villainous and shows a most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Right, Will Kemp. And he says, go make you ready. And we go on from there. But let's stop at that point tonight. And we'll maybe, Viv, come on back and we'll have some questions.
Hello. Oh, wow. Well, I've just asked everyone to send in questions here, but I'll start. This has just made me think a lot right now about intelligence in different characters in Shakespeare, and wondering, like, to us, everyone seems eloquent, even but how he sort of, I'm curious what your thoughts about Shakespeare's different ways of characterization and ways of thinking, not even so much smart or not or boom like that, but just it really, like, listening to you and what you were talking about, the torrent of language and the need for it here, how we can look for clues, not only in this scene, but generally when you're teaching about sort of where a character's thinking chakra is, is it high, is it low, where is it coming from, what are the clues?
Well, it starts, everything starts with the text. And a big question, as we spoke tonight, is between prose and verse. But if you're, a good example is earlier in Hamlet, when Hamlet says, he ends his speech, but I have that within which passes show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Clear, the verse is right on. Claudius then takes over the room and he goes, "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to show these morning duties to your father. But you must know your father lost a father, and he goes on, and the lines actually have extra syllables in them. "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to show these morning duties to your father. But you must know your father lost a father."
Feminine endings.
Feminine endings. And so what does that mean? Well, that's where the actor makes the creative contribution, but we sure note the difference, don't we, in the sound of that. If you're playing Claudius, are you trying to blow smoke? Are you trying to fill the air with words so that nobody's thinking too much about what Hamlet just said? Whereas Hamlet is right on point. I have that within which passes show, these but the trappings, he's wearing black, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Boom, boom, right there. And then, whoa, smoke. So there's that. But what I talk about a lot with my students is what I call the architecture of the speech. What's the connective tissue, particularly in verse? If you have a speech of 30 lines, is it and, but? And we never stress those small words, but we understand that the speech may be being built by a series of examples leading to a conclusion. And then an although might come in. It happens to be or not to be. To sleep perchance to dream. That's where the thing turns around. That's where it reverses. He's building his argument and said, but wait a minute, doom. And so and then what we do with those images that build, or a list of examples, say, is each one is then set out. We want to show both the pearl necklace, hold it together, but we want to show the individual pearls as well. The glass of flesh and the mold of form. So yeah, long answer to your question, sorry.
No, not at all. I think it's great. In fact, I just wondered there in terms of prose being more difficult, quote unquote, because you don't have the form necessarily
Right.
to help you, or that reversal. So what in a big prose speech, what on the sort of technical, I mean, you're so brilliant at taking us through thought by thought, but even just sort of technique wise, what are some of the clues to look for, things to look for in a prose speech, the
Well,
architecture of a prose speech?
yeah, well, let's look. I mean, tonight we had speak the speech, I pray you as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor, so we see, you see that the connective tissue there?
Yeah, uh-huh.
And we don't stress those, but they're there and the audience intuits them if we mark them. Now, a really important concept that Declan Donnellan talks about in Actor and the Target is when a new thought comes in, a thought is a target that always exists outside of ourselves. Now, do not saw the air too much. I see you out there sawing the air with your hand. When a new thought drops in, the way he phrases it, it elbows out the previous thought. It's in a hurry because it's either more accurate, more specific, more urgent, it gets at the heart of the matter in a better way. And with that elbowing out comes a release of energy. So every time, I'll overdo it a little, which he says not to do, nor speed up. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it, as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand, thus, but use all gently, for in the very, etc. So you see, each time the thought changes, there's a release of energy that is in pursuit of the objective, and that keeps the speech refreshed as you go. And it's like you get a fresh fuel. You get fresh fuel each time the thought goes. And part of learning to act these plays is understanding that you need what they call in the automotive business high-end torque. That if you're already going 75 and you put your foot on the accelerator, you actually do have the means to get to 100. You know, if you're driving a 4-cylinder car, if you're going 75, you put your foot on the accelerator, nothing happens.
Right.
What we train for is that you have high-end torque and you can be up in gears that most people never have to get to and still make the language intelligible by understanding it and letting it find its natural shapes so that people can understand its meaning.
You know, again, what I love about what you do, Ray, is that you're not talking about rules and the ways it's supposed to be.
No.
You're talking about exploding and making the language live and think in that way. And that is because you get a lot of Shakespeare in the way it was taught. What I know is when I'm auditioning people, I hear people come and you're like, oh, they're following the rules and it's not lived in. And that difference is huge. There is a question that came in about how old do you think Hamlet is? And if he kills Claudius, would he expect his loving public to accept it or be appalled?
Great. I'll answer the second question first. I think that in order to make the role make sense, he believes that if he kills Claudius, that he himself will be killed, maybe by Claudius's bodyguards, that he'll be done away with before he would get to make his case to the public. It's helpful to, it makes sense of a lot of things if he is afraid that if he kills Claudius, he himself will be put to death. That makes sense of to be or not to be, or at least that there's a good chance that that might happen. In terms of his age, yeah. I'm trying to, I don't believe it's mentioned. Oh, well, the gravedigger, he that is mad and went into England. Cannot you remember that? Every fool can remember that, says the gravedigger. I don't think the gravedigger says exactly how long it's been, but it's been a while. Hamlet is usually played in mid to late 20s, but you can play, my God, I was 35 the first time I played Hamlet, and then played it again at 42. That's a little old, so we, yeah, but it could be, I would think it could be as young as 25. I don't know you want to go much younger than that. So the answer is I don't have an exact textual basis that I can think of at the moment.
We've only got a couple minutes left. There's another question that came in because I think it's something you brought up today about discuss the value of studying the many Shakespeare plays as one prepares for a particular play and role.
Yeah. Well, the more you know, the wider you've traveled in the land of Shakespeare, to put it that way, the more you feel at home there, and the more echoes of things you hear. So that if you hear the word rose, for example, it'll fire off 10 things in your head. Or to use our metaphor of the theater, we know that how many times in other plays, man's life is likened to acting a role. 7 Ages of Man in As You Like It. All the World's a Stage and Men and Women Merely Players. Tempest. These are actors, as I foretold you, are all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. The Scottish play, poor player who struts and frets his hour on the stage and then is heard no more. So this idea of all of those are banging around in your head as you approach maybe this scene. And is he talking about himself, who actually does not acquire and beget a temperance that may give it smoothness? He calls in Horatio right after this. I'm sorry we didn't get to that speech tonight. It's so beautiful. But he may be telling Horatio how much he admires him, Horatio, because he is a man whose blood and judgment are so well commeddled that they are not a pipe for fortune's finger to sound what stop she please. That he is, that he's passion and reason in balance. And Hamlet probably is out of balance until Act 5, when he comes back and he has found a kind of balance at that point that leads to the end of the play.
Wow. So this is what I'm going to say as we finish, that there's so much more of Hamlet that we would love to see you do, but we did talk about the fact that we were going to journey elsewhere and possibly journey to some of the comedies, not meaning that this would be the last of Hamlet at all, but that we would journey perhaps to some comedies, and that we were going to give tonight's audience an opportunity through the chat to let us know if there were some favorites that they would like Mr. Dooley to perhaps investigate and share. I know that you have some favorites of your own that are certainly on the list, but we'd love to hear from you if there's one of the comedies. Twelfth Night, of course, just came through. Yes. Well, you've done that a few times.
I think maybe, I think next time, let's think about, we'll do a little introduction to Shakespeare's comedies, and then we'll talk about Twelfth Night and
Much Ado.
Malvolio, which is such a wonderful role, and had such fun with that. So thank you. But please, if there's a particular speech in one of Shakespeare's plays, or a particular play or question in Shakespeare that is of interest to you, please let us know, and I'll do my best to address those.
So Lisa sharing with us that she doesn't particularly love the comedies and prefers the tragedies and wants to hear more of them. What's interesting, Lisa, is that I will challenge you to come and see if you love them more once you've heard Ray dissect them. So there's the challenge. Diane Beckman says Midsummer, of course, and Much Ado would be great, but Twelfth Night is also great. Twelfth Night, I will say this, I'm going to put myself out there to say, if you do investigate much ado about at all, if you will let me essay Beatrice with you at any point, I would love to read a little scene with you
That would be
of
great.
that. Is
Lady Beatrice, have you wept all this while?
Senior Benedict. Wait, no, see, you know them all by heart. I wonder you should still be talking, right? Is that nobody marks you. Anyway, right. Anything Ray teaches is great. Well, I agree with that. And we've got a wide limit to Shakespeare. Well, all.
I will say this too. If there's, if there was, it's best if I stick to things I know. So if there was a performance maybe along the way that intrigued you and you'd like to hear how that performance came about, I'd be happy to talk about those as well. So.
Absolutely. Well, another amazing evening. Thank you all. And I'm just going to share a few words to everyone before signing off to say that I hope everyone, I'm sure everyone is aware that the performing arts are in an unprecedented moment right now of both hibernation and rediscovery. And while we know that nothing replaces the need and joy of experiencing live arts in communion next to one another, that we at PlayMakers are really hard at work to make sure that we remain an access point for sharing our craft, as you, Ray, do so beautifully. But also just to be able to tell stories and share stories that help us understand who we are and hold a mirror up. None of that is possible without you, our audience's support. And as ever, if you feel inclined and are capable of making a donation to support all that work and all the artists that make the work at PlayMakers, no gift is too small, no gift is too large. Stay tuned with us to learn more about what we hope is coming your way in 2021 and how you can continue to support PlayMakers, but truly showing up for these and being here with us with Ray is a huge and crucial part of the support. So thank you for that. Ray, cannot thank you enough for another amazing, amazing class. Look forward to seeing you next month. And to the rest of the audience, keep checking into PlayMakers Keeping You Company. There is a lot going on right now, including the stuck monologues, which are coming. We're right in the middle of unleashing them one day at a time, or all of them once that is done. And they're pretty special too. And Ray, of course, performs absolutely beautifully in one of those as well. So we hope you'll join us for that and much more. Good night, everyone. Happy Monday. Take good care. Thank you, Ray. I think I sign off with, I'm Vivienne Benesch, and I'm a playmaker.
I'm Ray Dooley, and I'm a playmaker.
Good night.